Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for That Shelf, and we're here to look at the BenQ 4550i projector.
That shelf.
So, fans of the channel will know that I'm a huge fan of OLED. It's been a long time since I've even contemplated looking at projector technology. A miss of technology, particularly from OLED, where you get pure blacks, where you get outstanding color representation, where you get basically the ultimate color picture environment within a home theater. It's absolutely extraordinary. And there's so many times I'd be actually in pretty substantial theatrical environments and thinking, you know what, this thing is probably going to look a little bit better on my monitor back at home. Now, one thing that unfortunately, from my perspective, happened when there was a shift in television technology, when sort of certain fads took over and other ones sort of disappeared, was one technology that, particularly when OLED had achieved really excellent status, is 3D. Now, many of you will not be fans of 3D. I totally understand. I, who had eye surgery, certainly can commensurate with those that actually find that they have challenges actually even experiencing 3D without getting headaches or other issues. That being aside, I think what's clear when it comes down to it, and I've had conversations like this repeatedly over many, many years, is there's good 3D and there's bad 3D, just like there's good color, bad color, good black and white, bad black and white. And what happened was that there were certain films, things like Avatar, that people got super excited about in 2009. And after that, a certain number of productions really rushed it. There's an entire debate we can have about whether post-conversion versus shot in camera is the divide. I don't think that's it at all. I think it's very similar actually to conversations we've had on this channel about whether there's a DSD process within vinyl, whether everything's all analog suddenly makes it good, or if there's a digital step suddenly that makes it bad. You can do good versions and bad versions of everything. And there are some films that for me absolutely definitively exist in the form of their 3D representation. It's as simple as that. I can think of films like Mad Max Fury Road, extraordinary in 3D. I spoke directly at length multiple times with George Miller, who continues to believe that 3D is the definitive way to actually see that film. Now, the definitive way, of course, is an IMAX 3D, but that's another thing. The closest I'm going to get at home to actually experience the dimensionality of that film is through 3D. Gravity, extraordinary. And then two of my favorite post-converts, Top Gun and Jurassic Park, fantastic in 3D. Yes, you have the Hobbit films, you have all kinds of other stuff, Lego Movie, movies that, even the latest Spider-Man animated films, if and when they're available in 3D. Now, without, again, diving too much into the weeds here, 4K UHD spec does not spec out for 3D. So there are no 4K 3D discs as of yet. There was no 3D Blu-ray when Blu-ray launched either, but fundamentally I don't think there's a real impetus to actually do it. So Blu-ray 1080p is still the top level that you actually have for being able to do 3D at home. And I have, I don't know, 100 or so titles in 3D that for me, I wasn't able to see unless I went to the sort of, the backup television, the backup OLED, the 60-inch OLED that I bought at the time, because I knew it was going to be the last of the 3D LG OLEDs, the 65E6P that I have. My 77 inch does not do it. And frankly, even if you spend $100,000 on a television or on a massive television, you can't get 3D. The only way to do that these days is through projectors. Now, projector brings a whole nother bunch of nonsense that I never wanted to deal with. It has to do, you have to worry about screen, you have to worry about position, you have to worry about the bulb. It was the bulb that was super frustrating to me, about having to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars every so often after a few thousand hours of watching, which won't take me very long, and that even with a brand new bulb, you actually have quite a diminution of light output as it went through. And while they could do 3D, there's different modes of doing it. On DLP modes, you're using particular technology that actually goes at a specific rate of hertz. it darkens the screen. And because the bulb is less bright, it means that the 3D experience was even darker than it was, say, theatrically. What was fantastic about OLED is I could actually use Real D glasses. I have a pair of Oakley Real D glasses that I could use and it would be perfect. I can't get that with projector, unfortunately. So for years, I thought that if I was ever to get a projector, I would actually do it right. I'd have like a proper crazy screen. I would go ahead and permanently make this a projector room. And the projectors I like are the $30,000 JBCs, these amazing 3-chip, incredible laser illuminating devices, and then there's another several $100s for the 3D add-on, and then you need RF 3D glasses, which do, a very good job, but, just way, way outside of my price range. And I was asked by Hot Docs, the people at a Hot Docs Theater, to actually present Werner Herzog's Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which I did, I guess, about a week ago. And that, the impetus was there for me to actually rewatch the film in preparation for it, and I knew that the Hot Dog Cinema couldn't do 3D. There's a few that still can do it. Obviously, the IMAX screens, some of the screens in Toronto here, at places, the multiplexes will still do it, and at the Toronto International Film Festival's Lightbox, there's a few theaters that do it, although they do it relatively reluctantly. But there's still titles, again, that I really wish to see within the confines of my existing home theater, with my sound, my Atmos, etc., and that I simply can't do where my other television is located, and plus it was only, quote, only 60 inches. So what I did was I bought a relatively inexpensive 18-year-old BenQ projector, a W7000. It's an old beast. It did trick, and I spent a small amount on it just so I could play with it. I thought I could mount it potentially on the counter here. I ended up getting a different way of presenting it, and it did the trick. It actually allowed me to experience 3D from Blu-ray in a way. But more importantly, what I did for the screen is I just got one of these sort of ones that are designed for portable use outside. Essentially, it's a sheet that has material that is conducive for basically 1.0 gain. And I mounted it between two bars, and I was projecting this. I was also doing this, obviously, in liaison with some of the more modern projectors that I'd seen as part of my review work that I do for Best Buy. So my own W7000, I set it up. It came with a bunch of 3D glasses, some of which worked, some of which didn't. And I got a taste of what I could have. But when I set up the projector and the screen, which again is this relatively screen, just put basically a black sheet over my television because the screen is not black backed, so the light actually bounces off and then it was reflecting off my television. And I set it up and I realized I was losing nothing in terms of audio. That I basically could, right out of the box, not do anything other than put up this sheet, play the projector, and when I want to do projector, I can get that. When I didn't, I can take it to the other room. I thought, great. And as a friend attested, even when I bought the thing, I guess this was just back in December, he's like, well, this will be your first projector. And this is not abnormal for me to do, but I got a taste. And I had the other aspects of it, getting the screen up, getting the rack. I basically have on a speaker right here, just out of frame, I have a speaker stand, one of those big heavy-duty speaker stands. I have a top plate on top that I can plop the projector on, set it up, make it work, and within minutes I can convert my room from being the emissive television, the OLED room, to being a projector room, and not have to worry so much about, ceiling mounted, all the stuff I didn't want to do. So in between there, I took a look at one of the BenQ gaming options that use, instead of using lamp like my old one did, which again, I didn't spend a lot of money on, but the lamp has 1,200 hours on it. It's pretty dark. And even now, 18 years after this projector came out, or whatever it is, It's still $400 for me to buy a lamp, and I find that offensive. I don't know why. It's the same reason I don't like inkjet. I mean, like, it's one thing to have toner, which just lasts forever, and then if you're going to change toner, it's fine. But just changing ink all the time, it's not the way that I like to deal with consumables. So I looked at, and I knew that laser was the way that I ideally wanted to go, but laser was still out of reach financially, and I hadn't dug into it at all because projectors weren't on my mind at all. I liked the idea that they were coming out with LED illumination. And it's interesting because since I've actually gone into this, I realized that actually just yesterday, the EU has actually come out and said lamp-based projectors are actually no longer going to be allowed to be sold. The lamps themselves that have a ton of mercury in them are not going to be available. And so just like we had with incandescent bulbs transitioning first to compact fluorescence and now to LEDs, you have here LED illumination. It is still using the DLP chip. This case that we're diving into, it'll be bigger. I think it's a 0.6 millimeter, not 0.6 millimeter, but the 0.6 version of their DLP chip instead of 0.4. So slightly larger actually illumination chip, and 4 LED lights that last 10 to 20,000 hours instead of 2,000 hours, depending on the mode and how hard you drive it. So essentially, built in here, you have non-user replaceable lamp, but the lamp itself should last years upon years. I mean, if you only watch 2 or 3 hours a day, it's 20 years. And because of the way that the technology works in LED is the perceived illumination is actually improved. And so even if you test ANSI lumens and all that stuff, the brightness measures sort of through spec somewhere around 2,500, 3,000 lumens at a max. The perceived lumens is enormous. It looks brighter. Just the way that our eyes perceive the light that's coming off of these lamps. It's just one of the joys of the balance between what machines see when they're actually measuring things and what our eyes actually see. Which means that when I actually watch stuff, I'm never watching in a totally bright room, but here in a dark light controlled room, I'm going to get really, really excellent colors, even for 4K stuff, HDR. But I'm also going to get 3D with pretty decent illumination, pretty decent luminance, not nearly as bright as I was getting on my OLED, of course, but about as good as I would get in a theatrical environment that used Xeon-based lenses. It's not IMAX with their laser GT and their dichroic lenses, very different than most Real D setups, but I'm now getting at home the brightness, the color, the contrast from 3D that I had expected from theatrical projection. And that is very, very exciting. So yeah, I've had one of these models for a while. That one's going back. This one's actually mine after I realized how well it works. So I thought I would crack it open and show you what's inside. And then we'll talk about a little bit more in detail about what the actual model does, things I liked about it, things I would love to see mild improvement on, but nonetheless, how those things sort of worked out that I decided to actually pick up one of the things. Now, as is per usual with these BenQ models, they actually have an internal Android stick. This actually sort of clips in on the side that actually gives you Android TV. I'll get into my frustrations with this in a sec. It comes with regular documentation, including, and I thought this was a mistake at first because, this is what I think. It's like, why would I be getting 2 sets of pairs of AAA batteries? But it's because it comes with 2 remotes, one for that, a dedicated one. We have a normal IEC power cable, just straight in. The one that I'm using is a much longer cable. What is nice about the IEC, because it's grounded, nothing in the way in terms of any issues of running long HDMI cables I have with some other projectors. I plugged it in and actually got ground hum, and I actually had to change the way that everything was being plugged in, but absolutely no issue there. One remote. This is actually the main remote for the unit, which powers on and off and has a number of other features. You know, it's not super fancy, but it certainly does the trick. And we have this, which is the calibration report, which again, I will get into in a moment. And there's another remote somewhere. It's probably underneath this. Right. Pull this out without doing too much damage. We'll see a very good shot as you see the back of the box. There we go. Okay. Actually, I just realized the other remote's probably inside the Android box. That absolutely makes more sense. So inside here we have the old styrofoamy nonsense. And the unit itself. So the unit itself is relatively lightweight, but is, you know, this is not like one of those monster JVC or monster Sony things that I've drooled over for decades. This is essentially, because of the way it works and because of the way that the lighting works, it's a light portable unit. I mean, it's very, very wonderfully structured. To actually behave in a way that allows me to take it down when I want it taken down. I'm just going to bring the other box up here without too much drama. And let's see if we can do this without completely destroying my lighting setup. I think this will do the trick, and then put it on top. Elegant as always. There's the guy. Okay, so this beast right here, let's try to get this in line. This beast right here is the 4550i. As we look on the top, we get a bunch of things that I didn't get with that sort of gaming system that used similar illumination. I get, first of all of their wonderful logos here. We have HDR, which is great. We have the Cinema Color DCI P3. Basically, we'll get into like how excellent the color is on there. 4K HDR, nice little sticker here. We have these dials that actually allow for physical lens shift rather than using digital lens shift, which is preferred in those circumstances. Underneath here, with ye old blue tape, we have the manual focus and zoom, but once you've actually set it the way you want, you can actually do this for a dust protection. And on the front, we have, you can see this little guy here, which actually protects the lens, and there's the lens, pretty straightforward. On the back, we have fans on the side, on both sides. So cooling fans certainly doing the trick. On the back, we have numerous inputs here. We have two HDMI inputs. We do have Ethernet input. I have to explore whether or not that actually works pass through to the Android. I don't believe it does. So I believe that's just for control. That actually I haven't investigated, but I'm not running Ethernet to it anyway. It would be nice if that actually used the internal stuff. You can see I have stuff like headphone outputs. There are speakers in here, so I can use this if I want. Because it's portable, I'll be able in the summer just to take this outside and actually run this as an outdoor projector. Absolutely, I can do that in the way that I can with some of the other portable stuff. And inside here, I'm not going to unscrew it here, but there's a single screw right on the side. It's really kind of annoying. I wish they had a better way. You can see here, there's a very small screw there. You undo the Phillips screw, this whole thing slides out, and this guy goes inside. And inside here is a third HDMI cable that you sort of put it, and I guess it's a USB Mini B connector that powers it on, and it allows you to internally here stream things from Netflix, from YouTube, from whatever you want. A full Android stick inside, baked into the unit. So once it's there, by having essentially an expandable version of this, so you don't need to replace the projector if you want to get a new version of this. I'm sure they'll have updated versions. This itself is an updated version of the previous BenQ ones. That's there. Rather than electronics being baked inside, you actually have the ability, essentially, of doing a stick. Now, it doesn't work with other, it could work, but it's not really designed to work with, let's say, a Fire Stick or other things. It's designed specifically to work with the BenQ version. So, out of the box, very light, very sleek. I love the color. The material is perfect. And it's not a big giant white one. So it sort of fades in the background, which is what I need to do with a dark home theater environment. Now, I want to crack open this guy because this is pretty hilarious. You get in this here, you get the individual calibration report from this. Now, so often, televisions come in the default mode that they actually have on anything. Television projectors, the default mode is just crap. It's so that it looks good under fluorescent lights at a big box store. Now, fewer and fewer people are buying in big box stores, but it's a whole nother conversation. But what you have here, and so I pay for ISF calibration for my television. It's been hundreds, $500-600 to have somebody come by with very extensive metering. I didn't want to do that with this because I knew I was going to be taking it in and out. So it's really fantastic is that we get a pretty decent calibration. I mean, you can see the calibration curves there right out of the box. You can see here's it's got my model number, my serial number. The calibrator was a Konica Minolta CL500. Is a good one. Measurement point center without lens shift. That's important. So no lens shift on here, etc. And then on picture modes, filmmaker mode they used to test the Rec 709. Color space, and for user mode they used DCI-P3, which is another color mode. 100% of DCI-P3 out of the box. I put it to user mode. I get measurable perfect color. Now, can you still tweak it? Can I bring in calibration and wring the most of this? Of course I can. We can get, that is just dealing with the sort of general grayscale stuff. There's 20-point grayscale calibration on this. You can do all kinds of nonsense that you actually want to dive into it. Am I going to? No. The reason being is that I can, out of the box, get color in filmmaker mode and user mode that is exceptional. And that's what I love about this. Just let me buy something that out of the box works. And there's so much in electronics, so much in this crazy hobby of either audio or video, where you just gotta mess with things in order for them to even behave the way you expect. And this thing out of the box does what I want it to do. Now, I'm going to be mounting it like this on a shelf. And I was really excited that there is that lens shift mode where it is actually physically moving the lens up and down. And I would hope, like my older model, that I could just put it on the shelf and physically have the projection itself move without having to worry about digital keystoning. Digital keystoning that itself actually affects the speed but also the resolution of what it's going. Unfortunately, the way that the lens shifting on this is not the way that I had frankly hoped for, and I hadn't probably paid enough attention to before I bought it, because when it's down like this, it's expected to mount this at the bottom of the screen and be able to lens shift up or left and right. I cannot have it mounted here and have the image go down like I can with my other one. My other one's like a little joystick and you kind of move it around and it makes the picture exactly the way that I want it to by basically bending the light coming out of the projector. This with these dials, which are a little bit chintzy, I gotta say. The dials themselves feel a little bit flimsy. Unlike the volume, unlike the focus and zoom modes on the inside. These feel really nice and robust, and you can make fine adjustments in a real satisfying way. These dials feel pretty chintzy. As soon as I got it, I realized, this thing really wants me, since the way my room, my ceiling is not much above where my head is it really wants me to mount it this way, upside down, and then to have the image go down from here. So I could I mount this on the ceiling? I could, but that for me defeats the purpose. Could I put it upside down on the shelf? Well, not really, because I have all of this stuff that I'm actually monitoring or adjusting and stuff like that. So it's not ideal. It does mean that I have to, in my circumstance, actually mount it on a slight angle down, and from there using some keystoning to make it work. It is not ideal, and I will probably continue to experiment with different ways. Maybe a ceiling mount that I can take on and off. I don't know, but for at the moment, I have it on this tray, and the tray allows me to gently put it down, so it's over my head. My couch is just here. I have a small room, and I've set it up with a 120-inch screen. But this does allow me to gently go right and left, which is great, which means that when I place it here, I'm not so neurotic about having this portable stand be exactly in the middle of the room, etc. That I can get it, make it work on the screen, and do get 99.9% of what I need. Yes, if I had a permanent screen, yes, if I had all of those stuff, I would go ahead and do it. But the whole point of this is to actually manage this portability. The colors out of the box, as I said, were fantastic. The menus are fine. They're decent enough. You'll actually get to see later on the video. I'll actually show what the actual screens themselves look like, but I found them satisfactory at best. I think that the way that everything works in terms of being able to turn on specific modes does what you want it to do. For my primary mode, which is 3D, it has to be a 1080 input, which means if you have anything that's actually up converting, like let's say YouTube or something like that, you have to basically force it into 1080 mode for you to be able to do that. But once you've done that, unlike, again, that gaming projector that I looked at, I have multiple ways of actually dealing with 3D, not just off of Blu-ray, but from files themselves, side-by-side files, top-down files. I have some archived 3D files that I can actually now play. I showed you the speakers on the side. On the side, there are a series of buttons here, navigation just like on the remote, just in case you need to kind of blend in the side. It's really quite nice. Here's what I like about this, and here's what I don't like about this. I love that I can have internally here, just plug it in, have it work, and then just behave like an internal Android box, and without anything else going in, without anything else plugged into it, just have this work as essentially a dedicated streaming device. The disadvantage is that it's only over Wi-Fi, which means it's a little bit slow, it's a little bit clunky. And I find on my system, with my Marantz 8802A, which is a slightly older version of dealing with CEC and ARC and all of that stuff, is that it constantly, when it was turning on, was switching over to this guy. And me switching back to HDMI 2, in my case, which was the ERC, in order to get sound out of this, I had to have ARC out. It just wasn't behaving, and it was messing up. It was changing the input on my receiver all the time. It's just this was talking to that, and just everyone was trying to overwrite everyone else. Super frustrating. So what I've done in my previous setup is I'm just using HDMI 1 on this, which does not use the audio return channel, the ARC, and I disconnected this. I literally unplugged this, and I've been using either my NVIDIA Shield or my Apple TV, and just doing it that way, because I know I'm getting 4K, I can get Atmos, I can get all the things that I get directly into my system, because my main processor doesn't do Atmos out of here anyway. I'm going to get better sound from my standalone boxes than I am from in here. And I will connect this if and when I have my projector not in my main home theater. Now, the annoyance about that is that tiny little screw. You got to unscrew it and do it. It would be nice if it was just a clip. You'd be able to pull it off and make changes to this a little bit more readily. That's not the way it's set up. As I said, the remote itself is fine. There are two, there's a settings thing and there's a projection settings thing. And this setting is meant for that internal Android thing. You have to program it. And as I said, there's another remote element that actually goes inside here that controls this and has things like a Netflix button and a Prime button, etc. I constantly am hitting this gear as for settings, and it's constantly telling me you haven't set up your Android thing yet. I find that crazily annoying. The remote itself doesn't light up when you pick it up. It does light up when you push a button, but obviously after you push a button, you sort of know where you're pushing a button. I've gotten used to it. It's come to there. It is IR, so I'm going to be programming this into my Nevo, for those that know about such remotes. But I'll do the trick with that. But other than that, it certainly does the trick. I have found through my projection of the movies that I love a new experience. As simple as that. I have things that I have loved for years on my OLED that I'm just seeing differently with a larger perspective. Again, 120 inches, I'm basically getting 110, 115 inches, and I'm sitting maybe 5 feet from it. It's completely preposterous. But as somebody who sits very close in a movie theater, I'm really experiencing that in a way that is fantastic. When it comes to 3D, as I said, the luminance is great. I'm really, really pleased. I picked up a couple newer glasses that weren't a fortune, and they really seem to be doing the trick and actually bringing the experience of 3D in a way that I'm super excited about. Of course, when you're watching things that are not the best quality at such a large screen size, you're really seeing some of the issues. Of course, I'm getting a higher level of black, sort of a grayer, murkier black than I am from my OLED, but it's a balance between that and just having the size, and it's fundamentally that difference that I have on a regular basis as a film reviewer of me going to a theater and just seeing a sort of a regular presentation and coming home and watching it on my OLED. There's tons of times where I'm in a theatrical environment and the black levels are not as much as I want them to be because of the nature of projection. Rainbows. Now, a lot of people will experience rainbows with DLPs. I am one of them. Now that I know it, it's just a limitation of the technology or the way that this technology works, where you're simply aware. And what that means is that when you're just watching something, it's fine. But if you dart your eyes back and forth, especially if there's a pinpoint with HDR, like a bright, bright part, and you sort of run your eyes back and forth, there's a lag as you're seeing each constituent color. You'll see red, green, blue forms a rainbow. You do not get that with 3-chip LCD. The disadvantage of 3-chip LCD is it would have cost me almost just hundreds more, almost as much as I paid for my other projector to get me set up with 3D. And that just wasn't the way I wanted to go. So, and then I would have to worry about color, dialing in the color and calibration. They're much heavier units, much more bulky, much more of a pain in the butt in order to move in and out of for environment. So everything's a compromise. But for me, this really hit that sweet spot. This after 20 something years of being in this hobby, of going from 3-tube Sonys to full CRT HD televisions to I guess I had a 36-inch tube to my first HD, which was a 3-tube rear projector, to my Curl Plasma that I still have, to my first OLED, which was a massive jump, to my 77-inch OLED. I've been seeking the ability to watch things at home in a way that just fulfills that desire to have at home a sense of the theatrical experience, to reproduce these films as best as I can within my environment. And so much of that has to do with the sound reproduction, which means that going to the other location and actually, throwing in 3D, it's just not as conducive as it is to have it here. And especially because 3D actually reduces the size just a little bit, this just fundamentally felt like the way to go. So let's look a little bit. I'm going to do my best to actually shoot some of the stuff on the screen so you can see some of the menus and the elements like that, and then we'll come back and we'll sort of wrap up this epic video about my new baby, my new projector. So when you first set up projector, you get these options. Whether you're mounting at the front ceiling, the rear, or the rear ceiling, you can actually obviously rear project it. The issue for me is that my front placement, I don't want it low like that, I want it at the top. But you can see it makes it very clear that it basically wants the projector to be mounted at the bottom of the image or upside down at the top of the image. I unfortunately can't do that, so I'm on a platform and slightly angled down, which is going to cause some issues, not extensive issues, but certainly some modifications that I'm going to have to make to the keystoning. So if you can see, if we go these, they obviously go different picture modes. So we want front. We are going to, sure, we can do this, English, yeah, it's not plugged in, which we know. We're going to dismiss this for now. Okay, so keystone adjustment will impact latency in fast mode. So obviously for gamers, and something that I didn't really talk about, I'm not a gamer, but for gamers, latency is obviously a big deal. And so any keystoning, any digital processing that is done whatsoever is going to be an issue. In my instance, that is not something that I particularly care about, and latency has not been a problem even with some keystoning applied. You can see the auto keystoning now has it at 13 basically. If I dial this back to what it should be at 0, this is what we're going to get. And we're going to have the elements actually sort of off the screen a little bit. And that is not ideal. So at 0, it's really not behaving. If I hold down OK, it goes, and it basically is fitting. Let's just adjust the lens a little bit. It's basically right at the edge. I can move it a little as my head's getting in the way of the projector here, but I can move it up and down a tiny bit here with some of the manual controls and get something pretty close to exactly what I want it to be there. So that for me allows to have a full space of minus 13 keystone of filling the entire space of my projector screen, exactly like what I want to do while still being able to sit on the couch in front and not have my head block the screen too much. From here we can confirm your remote has been optimized to control both projector and Android TV. That's totally fine. We'll just do confirm. So you can see here that I can actually choose a specific HDMI source. Android TV is turned off because I haven't plugged it in. A media reader would be if I put a USB key. HDMI 2 is what's required for ARC or the audio return channel. HDMI 1 is what I'm actually using. At the moment, what I'm going to do is actually go into the menu. When you actually pull it up, you have this basic menu that gives you the options. Basically, not very much. It gives you the information, the picture mode, etc., and my 2D keystoning, which I've already done here. But really, what I'm going to do here is go into menu type and make this advanced. Within here, I have all kinds of modes that we're actually going to be doing, which will be determined in part by what we actually have in terms of what input is actually being sent in. Different audio modes, different display modes. You can see this is where 3D is a moment grayed out, the installation. But in this case, what I can actually do is I can actually turn on this task pattern and adjust things just so that we get it exactly where we want on the screen. And you can see that by doing this manually, it actually allows me to really nicely dial things in. Focus, I can zoom and I can adjust focus directly here and get a very clean focus mode just via the test pattern, which we turn on and off. High altitude mode, obviously we're not going to use, etc., etc. The system information itself allows us to do things like color calibration. I can actually see my usage time, obviously 0 hours, and the different light modes, which is fantastic. The operation settings, this is where all these, whether or not we have indicators or not, power on and off, whether or not we actually power off. I actually like this being at 15 minutes. The firmware upgrade would be able to be accomplished this way, and obviously we can reset to factory default. Here's our position, 12-volt trigger, all of this stuff, network settings, all of these things would be actually set up if and when we were actually going to use this with the Android stick, which I'm not yet. So you can see here on just the general mode of that I'm doing through my 4K Panasonic player, I'm getting 4K. My picture modes, I have cinema, filmmaker, user mode, all of these have been pre-calibrated, which is fantastic. I can go into something like user mode and see, you can hear a little bit of a click there. And what that's actually done is clicked in on the wide color gamut, which is baked into this particular mode. The wide color gamut actually puts a filtration in that actually gives me 100% of DCI-P3 color space. It does reduce the luminance a little bit, but that's one of the sacrifices for getting such exceptional color accuracy. On the light source mode, we have things like normal, eco, or custom. On other elements, we actually have Smart Eco, which is a nice sort of in between for that. But it all depends on what the actual input is that you're actually doing. Fast mode off, obviously, but you can see here we can dial in specific sharpnesses, all the things that you'd come to expect from any of these user modes. Even if I go to filmmaker mode, you'll see pretty quickly it switches over. And within this mode, and I go back to advanced color settings, I again have the ability to change the light source, which changes the individual luminance, wide color gamut on again. Let's go back into picture mode, cinema. You'll hear it click out. That filter has been reduced, the brightness has gone up, and if I go into advanced color settings and I go to Cinemaster, this is where this local contrast enhancer can be adjusted. All of these various elements can absolutely be done here, and the wide color gamut is in this case off and grayed out based on this particular input. So if I'm playing just regular 4K material like this from the LG test this, you can see that my mode actually changes once it's HDR to, instead of the custom filmmaker, etc., I have both HDR10 mode and filmmaker mode. It obviously will accept certain video formats that actually do HDR, and HDR is obviously going to be limited compared to that it is from an actual emissive television. But nonetheless, you're getting quite bright and quite excellent color in the way that we would actually expect. So this would be a non-HDR similar thing, and you can see that the picture mode itself has already gone back to the bright cinema filmmaker mode user, and my ability to switch back and forth that way. And once again, for a projector perspective, the fact that I'm getting colors this bright, this radiant, and my ability to actually see this on a screen as large as this, it's a 120 or so inch screen, is really fantastic. I'm getting decent black levels, especially the contrast working within relative modes. It is a bright projector, it's a very capable projector, but it's giving me the images that I really want from something like this. You're only going to see so much from a YouTube video, but at least you get a sense that the depth of color and depth of all these elements is absolutely within keeping of what one would expect from any setup in 2024. But the fact that I'm able to do this and be granted the ability to actually play 3D content is absolutely a boon. In order to get 3D to work off some files, I have to do something a little bit funky. I actually have to force my shield into being in 1080p mode. It will not do 3D content sent via 4K signal. It's grayed out. It simply will not allow me to do it. So in terms of 3D content, this is just a 3D trailer that I have access to. You can see that we have side by side here, and this is clearly is meant to be a 3D presentation. This is what a 3D file would actually look like. In this case, it's side by side. This is an old IMAX trailer. But what I can do is I can go into the menu here. I can go to display. I can go down to 3D. I hit 3D mode, and now instead of being grayed out, I have the ability to actually choose frame sequential, top, bottom, or side by side. In this case, it's side by side. Now, you're not going to see it in 3D, of course, but if I do that, the projector makes a little bit of noise and actually kicks in, and what you have here is a 3D signal. You can see the things turn a little bit greenish. That's the color palette actually changes, but the luminance is still super bright. And if I was to actually put a pair of 3D glasses, you'll actually see the flickering, but you have individual, the text itself is not doubled up the way it was before. But you can also see, I mean, this is actually kind of an interesting way of doing it, is that you see just how much the luminance drops when you actually watch things in 3D. The camera exposure is obviously not doing the right thing, and it's a different frame rate because of the 3D glasses I'm using, but that's basically how it works, is that I can actually turn the stuff on and off manually. If I'm playing a 3D Blu-ray, it obviously kicks in directly. Once I actually stop playing this device, it goes back, it stays in 3D mode until I actually get out of it. That is one frustration. I would love if the remote itself had a dedicated 3D button that I could sort of cycle through all the different 3D elements and turn on and off directly from the remote. And so the images themselves continue to be quite extraordinary. The colors are very lush. Again, out of the box, this is what I get. It's so fantastic. This is in cinema mode. If I switch it over to filmmaker mode, things will get a little bit darker. You can see that these picture switching modes isn't the fastest thing in the world, as it sort of does its calculation, but once it's done, we're actually getting really sumptuous colors and really fantastic presentation. I'm extremely, extremely pleased, right from whether or not it's a 1080 signal, a 4K signal, whatever it is that we actually want to do. So you can see here on 4K, the picture mode, I can actually adjust it. It's not the fastest thing in the world for me to switch between, let's say, filmmaker and cinema mode. You see it takes a little second for it to do, and the menu actually stays on while it's doing it. But once it kicks in, after the black screen, you actually get the image that you want. That delay is less ideal than you want, but the colors themselves are incredibly sumptuous. On such a large scale, it is really fantastic, and I could not be happier with this. Both 2D and 3D color representation are absolutely fantastic out of the box. I know YouTube is going to give a little bit of a challenge for me to actually demonstrate this, but at least you get a sense of what it is in my room off a $30 screen. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. That's our sort of detailed look at the BenQ 4550i. Now that I purchased this, of course, here we are in February 2024. I'm fully expecting a brand new model to come out that might do something even more extraordinary. It's one of those things, as soon as I get this, I'm like, I know something's going to replace it. But this just came out really retail last August. We're going to see continuing improvements in technology for this. But I just knew at this point that a bunch of these projectors are actually losing the ability to do 3D because so few people are caring. So few 3D discs are being manufactured. Well, Avatar 2 just came out, but really, physical discs themselves, for some people, are no longer a growing concern as it turns to streaming. There's no streaming services yet that have anything to do with 3D. It will be interesting to see whether the sort of newest push for VR will actually allow people to see 3D through other means, but I have a very strong suspicion that's going to be locked into specific ecosystems, and we're not going to have that. I have players, I have Laserdisc players, I have HD DVD players, I have 8-track players, for God's sakes. I have players for formats that serve as my reference players in those circumstances. For those few titles that really, for me, I need them to be in that way. 8-track's obviously a little bit fun, but I had a turntable forever, and now look how crazy my turntable, my vinyl collection is. But I absolutely have things in HD DVD that I can't get any other way. There's certain titles that simply haven't even now yet been presented in that way. Certainly on Laserdisc, I have titles that haven't been released in any other way. This really, for me, is that sort of product that it's a little bit more than I wanted and a little bit less than I could have dreamed of my dream model. But it allows me to have, for many years, if not many decades, my ability to play back these titles in the way that, for me, do these films justice. And that's why I picked up this crazy projector. So there we go. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorba. Thank you so much for watching and supporting this channel. Please like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Visit our website at thatshelf.com. We will see you next video. All the best, and happy viewing.